Most people assume that when an empath finally pulls away, something dramatic must have happened. A betrayal, a blow-up, a single moment that broke everything. But that's not how it works. The breaking point of an empath isn't loud. It isn't sudden. And by the time it arrives, it was never really a surprise. Not to them, anyway. What you're about to understand is a process most people never see coming. Because it happens almost entirely in silence, empaths don't break the way most people do. There's no immediate retaliation, no dramatic confrontation the moment something hurts. Instead, when someone wounds an empath, their first instinct isn't anger, it's analysis. They sit with it, they turn it over, they ask themselves, maybe they're going through something, maybe I misread the situation, maybe if I just give it more time. When someone pulls away or goes cold, most people mirror that energy back. An empath does the opposite. They lean in, they check in, they offer more warmth, more patience, more understanding, even when none of it is being returned. From the outside, this looks like patience, and in some ways it is. But internally, it's something far more exhausting. It's the constant act of overriding their own feelings to protect a connection. It's quietly normalizing things that were never normal to begin with, one small compromise at a time. Here's what most people don't realize about empaths. They feel everything. Every crossed boundary, every moment of being undervalued, every time effort goes unreciprocated, they feel it deeply. But they store it. They don't announce it. They don't make a scene. Instead, they tell themselves it's not worth the conflict, and they move forward, carrying it quietly. Nothing is forgotten, though. Everything is recorded, psychologically, emotionally. Every inconsistency, every disappointment swallowed in silence. Every moment they chose the relationship over their own needs. And this is where it gets dangerous, because endurance has a limit. And when tolerance is stretched far enough, it stops being a choice and starts being self-abandonment. What began as love and emotional investment slowly transforms into obligation, and the empath may not even notice it happening until they're already deep inside it. This is the part that's hard to hear, but it's important. When an empath keeps giving, keeps communicating, keeps trying to repair what's broken without any reciprocation, they unintentionally send a message. The message is, there is no real cost to treating me this way. And people adapt, not always out of malice. Sometimes it's simply human nature. When there's no resistance, behavior escalates. When someone keeps showing up, regardless of how they're treated, the natural response is to put in less effort, not more. The empath stays because of how they're wired. They commit deeply, they invest fully, they attach meaning to relationships in a way that makes walking away feel like abandoning a part of themselves. So they don't leave. They try harder. And the cycle continues. And here's the paradox. The very act of staying, of absorbing, of enduring, is what eventually creates the clarity that ends it all. Discomfort becomes fatigue. Patience becomes depletion. And slowly, hope, the thing that kept them going, transforms into something undeniable, the truth. This shift doesn't happen because of one event. It happens through repetition. The same dynamic, playing out again and again until the pattern is impossible to ignore. All of that stored pain, all of those recorded moments, they organize themselves suddenly into one clear picture. What looks like a sudden withdrawal, a silence that comes out of nowhere, it isn't sudden at all. It is the conclusion of a very long internal process. The empath doesn't break because of what just happened. They break when they realize with complete certainty that it will never stop and that they can never go back to who they were before they knew that. When the awakening comes, it doesn't announce itself. There's no moment of rage, no tearful confrontation. It's quieter than that, almost unsettling in how calm it feels. They simply stop misinterpreting, where they once believed people are fundamentally good and effort will be reciprocated. They now see clearly. The inconsistency they kept excusing, they stop calling it complexity. The neglect they kept rationalizing, they stop calling it circumstance. They see it for what it was, a pattern, a design. And they realize with a kind of quiet grief that they had been managing the relationship almost entirely on their own. This clarity is disorienting at first. It removes all the justifications that made the pain bearable. But it also does something else. It returns them to themselves. They begin to trust their own perception again. And before anyone on the outside notices a change, the empath has already left internally. Once that internal shift happens, something fundamental changes in how an empath moves through the world. They stop over-explaining themselves to people who were never willing to understand. They stop pouring energy into conversations that go nowhere. The need for validation from the very sources of confusion, it dissolves. Not through force, but through clarity. Old dynamics begin to collapse on their own. Because the empath was the one holding them together. Without their constant emotional labor, without their compensation and overfunctioning, the imbalance becomes visible to everyone. Others feel the step back as distance, but it isn't distance, it's alignment. The empath has simply stopped responding to potential and started responding to reality. No more arguing, no more repairing something that only one person is building. If you've ever watched an empath go quiet and thought they'd turned cold, you misread it. This detachment isn't a shutdown, it's a reorganization. They haven't closed off, they've restructured. They've moved from high engagement, overcompensation to something more deliberate, structured silence. They stop filling every gap in the conversation. They stop reacting in real time to every slight or inconsistency. They stop rescuing dynamics that were never theirs to rescue. And what replaces all of that frantic emotional labor is a calm that took a long time to earn. They're still observing. They're still present. But the compulsion, that constant pull to fix and smooth and give more, is gone. In its place is precision, deliberate engagement, access that now has to be earned. There is a kind of power that lives in the space between stimulus and reaction. When an empath learns to pause in that space, to choose their response instead of defaulting to one, they reclaim something they'd been giving away for a long time. The ability to decide who gets their energy. Who gets their time? Who gets access to their depth? Awareness without obligation is not coldness, it's wisdom. And silence, real deliberate silence, becomes one of the most powerful statements they can make. It ends imbalanced dynamics not with an argument, but with a decision. After the withdrawal, after the silence, the work of rebuilding begins. And this time, it looks very different. Boundaries aren't reactive anymore. They're preventative. The empath stops waiting for someone to cross a line before they draw one. They start asking earlier, does this deserve me? Not out of arrogance, out of self-respect. They stop overriding their discomfort. They stop delaying their own needs for the comfort of others. Their presence becomes conditional, not on perfection, but on respect. And here's what makes this phase different from anything before. The boundaries aren't enforced through explanation or confrontation. They're enforced through behavior, through choices made quietly and consistently. The identity of the empath shifts from someone who endures to someone who decides. And that shift creates a kind of emotional consistency, a steadiness that no one can take from them. So what does it actually mean to break an empath? It doesn't mean breaking them down. It means breaking them open into something more defined, more anchored, more themselves than they've ever been. They come out of it with a clearer sense of who they are and what they're worth. With no confusion between endurance and love. With the irreversible understanding that not everyone deserves access to their depth. They don't become colder. They don't become louder. They simply become wiser, more deliberate, more protective of the rare and genuine thing they've always carried inside them. They move through the world differently now, not because they lost something, but because they finally stopped giving away what was always meant to be sacred. That's the truth about an empath breaking point. It was never really a breaking at all. It was a becoming